Businessman. Edith Frank, née Hollander, came from a prominent German Jewish family and was a devoted, though often anxious, mother. Dr. Nice. For a brief period, Anne's childhood was idyllic, filled with friends, games, and the simple joys of a peaceful life. She attended a nearby school, her laughter a common sound in the neighborhood playgrounds. This fragile peace, however, was built on the shifting sands of the Weimar Republic's political instability. The Franks, once secure in their identity as Germans, suddenly found themselves targeted and ostracized. Discriminatory laws were enacted with chilling speed, stripping Jewish citizens of their rights and livelihoods. Public spaces became hostile, and the threat of violence was an ever-present undercurrent of daily life. Recognizing the grave danger, Otto Frank made the painful but necessary decision to uproot his family. He chose Amsterdam in the Netherlands as their refuge, a city known for its history of tolerance. In 1933, Otto moved ahead to establish a new life and business, with Edith, Margot, and Anne following shortly after. They settled in an apartment on the Merwederplein, where Anne quickly adapted to her new surroundings. She learned Dutch, enrolled in the 6th Montessori school, and her charismatic personality soon won her a new circle of friends. For 7 years, Amsterdam provided a sanctuary, a return to a semblance of normalcy where Anne could once again flourish. She was a spirited and sometimes mischievous girl, known for her love of storytelling, movie stars, and ice cream. Yet the storm they had fled was gathering strength and would soon follow them. The deceptive calm was shattered on May 10, 1940, when Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands, a neutral country. The Dutch army fought bravely but was overwhelmed, and the occupation began. The familiar, terrifying pattern of persecution started anew. Anti through the Jewish community. As the situation grew more desperate, Otto and Edith Frank began to make secret, meticulous preparations for the ultimate act of survival, going into hiding. The hiding place was ingeniously conceived within the confines of Otto's business premises at Prinsengracht. The building consisted of a main house at the front and a rear extension, the Achterhaus or annex. A movable bookcase was constructed to conceal the entrance to this hidden apartment. The fateful moment arrived on July 5, 1942, when Margot received an official summons to report for a work camp. dismantling batteries. Despite the horrific conditions, Anne and her family were briefly reunited with friends and were able to receive some news. This camp. The journey was a 3-day ordeal. After us, I'm busy. diary remains a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and a timeless call to create a world where no child has to live in fear. The great chestnut tree that she viewed from the attic window, a symbol of nature and freedom, eventually fell in 2010, but its saplings are now planted in parks and memorial sites around the world, a living continuation of Anne's legacy of hope.